This is the Sound Devices MixPre-6 Mark II. In this video, I'm going to talk about the differences, the top 3 differences between the Mark II and the Mark I. The only 3 that matter to me anyways. And if you're in the market for a digital audio recorder, this will maybe help you decide on whether to get the first one used or used somewhere, or the second version. Or if you have the first version and you want to upgrade to the second version, these 3 things might be the deciding factor if you wanted to upgrade. But before I talk about the differences, let me go through the similarities, because they're very similar. Here is the body design. On the back, you have the same sled, battery sled. This battery sled holds 4 AA batteries. It runs for a few hours. There's an SD card, 1 SD card slot, and then a tool to adjust a wrench to adjust the tripod and camera mount on the top and bottom. On the right side, here's one difference. You have a larger volume knob for the headphone. Other than that, these are all the same. Headphone, aux, mic in. You have, this is for TC timecode with HDMI. So if you have a compatible camera with an HDMI out, you could plug it into here, and that way when you press record on the camera, it automatically starts the recording on the sound devices. These are XLR TRS. Here's the front panel, exactly the same. You can see the differences. The only difference is this color here. This is orange, the Mark I, Mark II silver. And then on this side, also almost identical. The difference here is this USB, the coloring is different, but there's different functionalities with the USB. The reason why there's a USB-C and a regular USB is that the regular USB, on both of them, you can connect a keyboard. So if you're recording on set and you need to label all the tracks, you can type on the keyboard, plugging directly into the USB. With the USB-C port, the USB-C port can connect to the computer, and then this device becomes your DAW, your digital audio interface, and all of the inputs, it will give you 4 inputs or 6 inputs, the MixPre-6, it'll give you 6 inputs into your computer. As far as the audio quality goes, I cannot tell the difference between either recorder. They sound identical to me. The preamps, I believe they're very close preamps. There's been a few upgrades to the analog digital converters in the Mark II, which I'll get into. But other than that, you can't go wrong with the Mark I. If you find the Mark I used, or if you find it on sale somewhere new, and you're wondering if the quality will sound better on the Mark II, it doesn't. If you're doing it properly, if you're doing the recording properly. Now this brings me to the 3 things that make them different, that make the Mark II superior to the Mark I. If you need these 3 things. The first one, and the biggest difference between the Mark I and the Mark II is that the Mark II can record in 32-bit float mode. All that means is you have a basically raw audio recording. If you compare this to raw video, when you're shooting in RAW, or you're taking raw still images, you have a large dynamic range. You can adjust a lot of things in post. The file sizes are bigger, but you can do so much more in post by shooting raw or taking raw photos. 32-bit is the same thing. You can undermodulate or overmodulate your signals, and you could raise it up or lower it in your editor, and you'll save the track. So you'll essentially never mess up your audio recordings, at least for the audio levels. You can mess up the audio recordings where you put your microphone, the proximity and all that stuff, and the extra noise if you're recording dialogue in a kitchen and you leave the refrigerator on. You can't change that stuff. You're gonna have to use some other post plugins, or maybe you can't even fix it. But as far as the overmodulation goes, or the undermodulation, if you record something really quiet and then somebody screams, by recording 32-bit float, you'll always be able to recover the lows and recover the highs that are clipping. On the Mark 1, you can't do that. But both of these have an audio limiter, analog limiter. The analog limiters in the Sound Devices MixPre, I believe they're the best in its price range. There's nothing close to the analog limiters. And the analog limiters lowers the volume automatically when things go a little too loud. You program that in. In the off chance that you're recording a jumbo jet or a boat or fireworks and it goes too crazy, and the analog limiters, it may clip. And that's where the 32-bit float comes in handy. The 32-bit float also works if you're using this as the DAW, DAW, and you want to record in your Logic Pro or Pro Tools. You want to record in 32-bit float digitally. You can do that because this has the digital analog converters in the Mark II. Mark I doesn't have all that. But do you really need 32-bit float? If you're experienced, you really don't need it. Because if you know how to set your levels, you would never get into the situation where things go too crazy because you'd be on top of it. And 32-bit float is a new technology that hasn't been around on a consumer level. I think this is the first one. This and the Zoom F8 maybe. But for years, since the beginning of audio recording, you didn't have 32-bit float. Now you do. Most people, the professionals, don't need it, but it's just that extra, when you want the best quality, you get that. The second thing is the timecode generator. On the Mark II, the stereo out also functions as a timecode generator, so you could put timecode into the camera or into other devices where you couldn't do that in the Mark I. Timecode generators, do you really need that? On big productions, if you're multicam or if you're doing sync sound and you want to do it more on a pro level, yeah, that's all good. But if you have a slate, clapper slate, clap your hands, you really don't need the timecode necessarily. Timecode is always good if you want to be professional, save your editor time syncing, but not really necessary. And the third upgrade from the Mark I to the Mark II is the additional functionality of the USB port here. Since this only has one SD card, you don't have a backup. Some people are worried about having a backup if your SD card fails, or if you just want multiple cards, so you can have one immediate backup, and then you could clear out the one card, but then another card you can always maintain as your safety. Now, with the USB, you can take a thumb drive, a regular thumb drive. You can even get the smaller ones that are the size of the port itself. Plug it in here, and then you could immediately duplicate in real time to the USB stick. So after a shoot, you can unplug the USB. You can get a bunch of these. These are really cheap. They're often cheaper than the SD cards. So you can get a bunch of these, plug it directly into your computer after the shoot, and immediately download all of the audio files. And you can keep the SD card as a backup, or you can keep this as a backup. You can't do that with the Mark I, and I don't know why that's not just an easy firmware update with the Mark I. I wish that could be in the Mark I, because out of all the features I mentioned so far, with the I know how to do the controls with the gain and stuff, so I don't have to really worry about 32-bit float. But having this backup system would have been nice to have on the Mark I. Accessories. With the Mark I, you only get this and this cable. This is the USB-C cable that powers the device externally, and it also is connects you to your computer for to use this as a DAW. This was before the USB-C was more ubiquitous with all other Mac computers and PCs. Back when this was first released, a lot of computers only had USB 3.0, so that's why you had to use it this way. So you had to plug both of these in to your computer and this into the recorder in order to charge it and to transfer everything. But with the new version, with the Mark II, you get a few things that you didn't get with the Mark I. With the Mark II, in the box, you get one USB-C cable, a pretty long USB-C cable, and this is how you can connect the device to your computer, and you can also power the device externally. And you also get an AC adapter. The AC adapter goes right into the USB-C port, and that's how you power the device. This is exactly the same as the Mark I version, but the Mark I version didn't come with the AC adapter. You had to buy it separately. The Mark II, it's inside the box.